working with Kanye, there's certain things that rubbed off on me just from being around him. Even something as simple as the sort of like 360 vision of every project. Like I really remember observing him being in the studio, making a beat and already thinking not only of what the flow should be on that beat, whether it's for him or for someone else, who the guests might be, but then also what the cover would look like and who's going to make the video.
Cool, man. So just diving right in. If you can give just a little bit of background, you've done a few things, but sort of how you find yourself today.
I mean, I'm a DJ first and foremost. Came up in the underground hip hop scene. Won the DMC World Championships at the age of 15 and won a few other battles in the years that followed. So really cut my teeth and got my name established by winning 5 world championships as a DJ by the time I was 18. And at that point, I kind of did maybe my first pivot and, got into the sort of broader realm of DJing beyond with turntablism and battles. Had a first label in those early years around the same time that I was battling. My brother and I had an independent hip hop label called Audio Research. In the 2000s, started working with Kanye, scored with him and collaborated with him for about 4 years. Around the same time, got into production, remixing, and kind of got myself down the path that I'm still in now, which is more of a sort of multi-hyphenate role of producer, remixer, kind of cultural connector type, and just someone with kind of a voice about DJing, I think, and eventually started Fool's Gold Records at the top of 2007, which is still a big part of what I do. And through that kind of got a chance to, help launch careers of some other musicians, from Danny Brown to Kid Cudi, Flostradamus, Run the Jewels, as well as my own projects, whether it be Duck Sauce or more recently, the Brothers Markovich and all that fun stuff.
And then in terms of visuals, so obviously there's a lot of different eras there. Are there any like visual artists or places that you were kind of mining your references of the things that you liked, like when you were thinking about creating your own stuff?
My brother and I work very closely together on all our projects, and he's always kind of helped me fine tune the aesthetics, the visual identity of what I do ever since we were, teenagers getting into hip hop, and he was writing graffiti all the way to, various projects through the years to current day, still my creative director. But we grew up listening to hip hop, that's the lens that we see everything through. So whether it be, admiring the cover art of Beastie Boys, in the earlier years and kind of figuring out like, oh, that's Hayes's hand style. Wow, Hayes is a graffiti artist. I love the way he writes. From that, from that kind of perspective, other record covers from those years that really marked me, like Farside's Bizarre Ride to the Far Side, the first album, records like that. Even the sort of like classic 90s run of Def Jam record covers going into the 2000s, where, as I got into my 20s and befriended a lot of peers who were themselves visual artists and getting them to work on some of my artwork, that process becoming, more of an active collaboration with friends, all the way to later on getting into Swiss typography and more of a fine art affinity, but always looking at that stuff from the lens of hip hop and kind of seeing the connections between aesthetic styles and references and, this sort of like East Coast gritty New York lens that just kind of shaped my whole taste palette when I was growing up, growing up in Montreal, but looking at New York as the mecca of hip hop and just idolizing the way things looked and they came out of there. So like you mentioned, there's been, a lot of sort of chapters to the visual identity of what I've done, but I think there's a certain playfulness that I'm drawn to in a lot of the artwork that I choose for my work. Around the time that my friends and I started Fool's Gold, Dust the Rock, visual artist, rest in peace, of course, was someone that I started working with closely. It's also around the time that I moved to New York myself, and he was kind of just part of a group of friends in New York that that became kind of my nucleus. He created the visual identity for Fool's Gold, from the logo itself to every record cover for the first 5 years of the label. He also created the Duck Sauce logo and visual identity, all the way down to the Danny Brown t-shirt that I'm wearing today. It was, his work from back in those years. Dust was primarily an illustrator. And again, when I mentioned his sort of playfulness, there is a certain humor in illustration in general, I find. And so Dust really helped define a lot of the branding identity of, the projects that I still do today, from Fool's Gold to Duck Sauce. There was a point in time, a couple years after that, in the sort of early to mid 2010s, where I worked a lot with an artist called Kid McGrath, who's from Argentina, but was popping on Tumblr, and that was really, it still is today, is really one of the best current artists when it comes to a sort of 80s kind of video game aesthetic. He did my tour visuals for many years and a couple of record covers too. So now it's kind of like a chapter of a couple of years working with McGrath. But like I mentioned, a lot of stuff just kind of goes back to this hip hop aesthetic. My current logo that I've had since 2014 was created by an artist called Gorey, Gorey. He's originally Swiss, but New York based graphic artist, illustrator, but graffiti artist also. And in the last 5+ years, I've worked with a typography studio for tour visuals and record covers, kind of bringing things into a little bit more of a elevated, slightly highbrow world of artwork, but again with humor, taking Swiss typography but distorting it and doing a lot of like kinetic motion tricks with it that makes it playful, right? Like taking this thing that seems really stiff and making it fun. Another thing that I should mention is that when Dave and I work on my visual identity, there's an awareness of what already exists in the DJ world. And we're kind of playing against that and kind of thinking, if everyone else in the DJ world is doing XYZ, whatever it might be, and there's always like strong trends that tend to be kind of cheesy. It's rare that I like, and I don't want to sound like a snob, but it's rare that I like visual identity of stuff in the DJ world, especially in electronic space. We're going to look at that and think, what can we do that's going to be the polar opposite? That's kind of where the typography thing came in a couple of years ago. A lot of Duck Sauce's recent visual identity, especially for tour visuals, is more influenced by like literally Adam Curtis documentaries and like cut up raw video footage, but kind of playing with the idea that Duck Sauce's music is sample based. And this is kind of a sample based approach to visual, right? Grabbing video snippets from completely other contexts, other eras, whether it be, disco dancing, but also tacky 90s Eurovision, broadcasts mixed with footage of Geraldo Rivera on TV, and just cutting that up the same way that we cut up our samples in our music and creating this collage universe.
Yeah.
So
feels very natural to do that.
The last thing we want to do with my branding is for it to come across, as snooty or snobby. It has to stay kind of dirty and close to the ground. It has to stay fun. But I think it's definitely possible to create visual branding and identity that is fun, that is shooting from the hip and spontaneous, while also having a very informed thought process behind it. Being able to verbalize, put into specific references what it is that we're referencing, why we're going for that, and kind of intellectualizing the whole thing, then rolling our sleeves up and making it dirty and fun again.
Right. But it's like, so you're giving yourself a sandbox, and then knowing what that is, and then the ability to shoot from the hip, you'll know if you can land in that space because you kind of defined it, you thought about it ahead of time.
100%. Everything is done with intention. Anything done with intent is done with intention and done with an awareness of the connotations of all kinds of aesthetic. And I think it's important to find this sort of sweet spot where, as the artist, you know what your influences are, your references are, you know what the intention is, but some of the viewers might just be either scrolling on their Instagram feed or just watching an LED screen at a show and quickly being hit with something, and they might not even know why they like but it needs to still work.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same thing with music. I might nerd out for hours over mastering and all types of, you know, tricks for, you know, multi-band limiters and, you know, stereo fields, exciters and all kind of shit.
Right.
I need the listener to just like it instinctively. They might not know why it's hitting them in a certain way or how I got to that end result.
Yes.
If it doesn't land, none of that work is working. It has to land and provoke an emotional reaction to the person that's not even actively thinking why they like it or not. You know, there's so much of everything being produced now. Like we're in such a saturated time period of music releases, video content, and what have you. And everything is now the result of so many iterations and generations of regenerating things that were done before, that I think for either for new artists or for younger audiences, sometimes people might not even fully realize where something is from or where they know it from. And it's all too easy to get tied up into whatever the aesthetic of the moment is, because you're seeing it everywhere at such a big mass that I think an artist could easily think, you know, I guess this is the type of record cover I should make because everyone else is doing that. And I like what they do, so let me do that too. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's always a way to not take the easy route and to go find something, to go pull something from, you know, an area that people haven't really dug from and still have it feel somehow familiar. And I think as an artist, musically and visually, it's fun to find ways to create something that the person receiving it gets a certain familiarity from what they're getting without even really knowing if they know that thing or not, you know, but that usually works out well when people are like, oh yeah, I like this thing. They're not sure if they know, if they already know it or if it reminds them of something in their childhood, or, you know, whether something is a sample or whether it sounds or feels like a sample, or whether a record cover is a reference to something, or it just kind of hits a sweet spot. But if you get that kind of familiarity, but then the heads know that you're actually creating something original, then you're usually in a good place.
Ever wonder how to truly cut through the noise and get your music to a broader audience? The Cult Creatives is a niche agency servicing the communities and brands surrounding the spaces of music and fashion. Our unique backgrounds of being highly involved with some of the largest music and fashion brands in the world gives us a unique perspective on how to connect creatives with their audiences. We offer a variety of services including creative direction, design, photography, videography, and strategy. Head to thecultcreatives.com to learn more. The Cult Creatives, not to be replicated, but if you try, we wouldn't blame you.
So looking at the Kanye years specifically, is there anything that you feel like you picked up then that would be good for younger artists to, you know, hear about their brand and kind of how they should think about it? Like anything from that era specifically?
Sure. I mean, working with Kanye, there's certain things that rubbed off on me just from being around him. Even something as simple as the sort of like 360 vision of every project. Like I really remember observing him being in the studio, making a beat, and already thinking not only of what the flow should be on that beat, whether it's for him or for someone else, who the guests might be, but then also what the cover would look like and who was going to make the video. Like that, he was already thinking about that as he was making a beat. And I was able to apply that to my stuff too. That was just by osmosis, just from being around him.
Right.
But it's also the years that I worked with him were years where I was befriending a lot of artists and photographers and people with t-shirt lines and things like that. And I had access to some of these artists who are doing really exciting stuff that he hadn't even met yet because he was becoming so big so fast. So he influenced me by showing me how you could think about the whole picture of something you're working on. But then I ended up connecting him with certain artists. So you'd see me working with someone. I would make a mixtape and get someone to do the cover. And he'd be like, yo, I've been trying to find someone with this style who did this. And I would kind of link them up. So we rubbed off on each other in that way. But, one thing that's funny to think about in those years is those were the MySpace years, right? And, as a DJ, MySpace was the first social network that I joined. And, I'm sure you remember, but it was set up in a way where people could, plug in their own HTML code and create their own backgrounds for their pages and post the flyers for their shows or post the artwork for their mixes or mashups or bootlegs, all on one sort of landing page on one destination, obviously pre-Instagram and pre any of that. It kind of motivated me to make my visual identity really consistent, right? So this was a point in time where on one hand, I was making a bunch of new friendships with other producers and DJs. We were all kind of teaching each other how to produce on a laptop, and we were throwing parties and starting to make our own music. I've been DJing for over 10 years. I was already world champion kid. This was a new phase of now I'm making music. Now I'm bringing people together and piecing together collaborators. And MySpace as a visual platform really motivated me to think twice and be like, what do I want my page to look like? If someone kind of hears my song on someone else's page, when they come to my page, what's the reference that I want them to see? Do I want it to look like a sort of Xerox 90s punk flyer? Or do I want it to look like a Tron graphic? Or do I want it to look like some graffiti bubble letters? Or do I want it this or that? And choosing a style and committing to it, and then thinking, all right, well then the tour that I'm doing in 2 months should be consistent with the way my page looks, right? And this little free download of a mashup that I'm also giving away, well, that should look like the rest too. Those years, thanks to the internet, that's when I really started thinking about all that. But it also kind of made me think twice and pay attention to some of the labels that I really liked, whether it be Moax or Stone's Throw, but even Factory Records, these labels, Ninja Tune, where as a fan, you would buy every release and trust them and think, if the Stone's Throw's putting this out, it's going to be dope. I'm going to buy it. And then you got a little section of your record bin at the house that's all from the same label, and all those covers make sense together.
Yep.
And you're like, oh yeah, this is it. I guess this is a brand. It's funny to think about that, because in those years, using marketing lingo and talking about literally branding was kind of cheesy.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Working with brands, getting sponsorships from a brand to pay for a tour or a record rollout or something was a little bit something that you had to tiptoe around. You wanted to make sure you didn't come across as a sellout, because everything was very DIY. It's crazy to think about how in the years that followed, everyone became sort of self-taught branding experts. And there's a language that penetrated that was no longer boardroom, cheesy suit, cubicle talk. It became the language that everyone around us spoke. I still feel a little bit uneasy using marketing language, but that's what we all do in our scene. We do define the brand identity of all these different properties, whether it be one artist at a time or a label, or even a project within a label, a compilation, all that stuff. It's treated that way. We just don't always use the lingo because we don't want to sound like Suits, but we get him.
Totally. And I think that's it's important to note that the consistency, because as a record collector and as a fan, it's when you do have that feeling about a particular label and you can trust them, that it's I think that's where a lot of young artists or even, startup labels, it's like you'll look and sort of the visual identity. It's like you go to SoundCloud and it's like all over the place.
Yeah.
Why do you, and it's tough because it's like, I'm sure it's like you're an ultra creative person and you like a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
How, like, what advice would you give on the sticking with something, and being consistent? And then, so it's like you have had different moments where you will sort of have a new look and like you will change and evolve. And so consistency, then like, find it okay to, to kind of go on to the next chapter.
Yeah. Well, look, when it comes to the advice side of things and just, helping people figure that stuff out, I also totally understand that visual branding doesn't necessarily come naturally to everyone.
Yes.
And like I mentioned, I do all this stuff with my brother, who's really good at all things aesthetic. If it was just me by myself, it probably wouldn't be as forward thinking or as interesting. I have a pretty good sense of consistency myself, but just going and finding what the next thing is going to be, that's what Dave and I really do together. For someone trying to figure this stuff out, so similar to my example, sometimes it's the question of finding that person in your circle who can help if it's not you. I also have, musician friends who handle that stuff for themselves and they're great for it. I do think that it's worth putting the effort in that. One, because I'm always thinking about, cutting through the noise and putting myself in the shoes of the person that hears you for the first time or discovers you for the first time, and make sure that they get a clear sense of what it is that you stand for. And, when there's 8 gajillion, artists are out there, when there's 100 bajillion releases every Friday on Spotify and merch drops on Instagram and Shopify or whatever else, the more you can do to clearly define who you are, what you stand for, and figuring out creative ways to make the visual aesthetic be consistent with the musical aesthetic.
Right.
That just helps potential fans or potential collaborators or potential bookers understand what you stand for and come to you as a listener, come to you as a buyer, or come to you as a booker, so it helps communicate what it is that you do. And I think it's an exercise that's fun, because when you do find that thing that sticks, it's so satisfying. And you can also, it's fun to like put yourself in the shoes of the listener, the fan, or even put yourself back in the shoes of when you first discovered some of your favorite bands when you were younger, and thinking about like going and revisiting some of these record covers and thinking, well, why did I like this so much? What feeling did it give me? And how did it play with the music? And if you had a poster or something in your room, like there's a reason why it connected with you, so trying to create that feeling for someone else. So, beyond just like the efficiency of connecting with a potential audience, I do think that there's like it's almost like a riddle to solve. That's really satisfying when you do solve it. When you find the thing that sticks, right? And you're like, now, because if you're talking about it with a musician, you're working on the sound, the music first. When you're able to stick a visual to it, you're giving multiple dimensions to your work. Now it's like a multi-sensory thing that, it has even more of a 3D feel to it. I speak a lot about reference points and things that echo back or harken back to something from the past. But I also think that it's amazing to stumble upon things that just feel exciting and new. Those record covers or tour posters or whatever that just kind of make your mind explode, where you find yourself staring and thinking, I can't tell if this is real or painted or computer graphics. Or there's legendary cover artists like at Hypnosis, who did a lot of those Pink Floyd covers in the 70s.
Right.
And where you would look at it and be like, I don't know if this is a picture or a picture with painting on it or trick photography or what it is, but I can't stop staring at it. And, there's some of those all the way to now, obviously with like computer graphics, there's there's the possibility of creating things that just don't even exist in our physical, tangible world, where you can, just create shit that your mind can barely wrap itself around. So, there's fun. I think my point is, like, there's a certain fun in that too, in creating something that no one's ever seen.
Totally.
There's that. But sometimes it's just a really simple graphic that for some reason, whether it be the geometry, I mean, again, it's just the Danny Brown cover that bested on my t-shirt. But that classic Mantronics baseline 12-inch cover, where it's just something about the font that like stays imprinted in your brain your whole life. It's finding those couple of shapes and lines and colors that just feel like they will stand the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, I became a DJ because of record covers. I actually was more into the art, and I love music, but I was into the art and was collecting, because I just thought the art was incredible, and then being able to listen to the music and experience it. And I think that's, then it was like, oh, I have all these records. Maybe I should, play out and, share this with people. And I think maybe that's so as just a kind of a last question.
Yeah.
Just thinking about, branding and position and art, is that if there was one lesson from A-Trak, like this one's a really good one, like you've done all the things that you've done in the space, but if there was one like hot lesson that you could give to somebody in terms of branding, what that might be?
I would say one thing that's been helpful over time to sort of, especially when you're looking for a logo or something that's really going to last, to think like, would this work as a sticker? Or like, it might seem silly, but would this work on a chain? I don't wear jewelry myself, but like the best logos work in all these, derivatives and applications. You know what I mean? So is this going to look good when it's in small on the bottom back of the record cover? Is this going to look good when it's a sticker on a light pole that you walk by at 3 a.m?
Yeah.
And then if you can pass that test, then you have something that's going to last.